Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Mobilidade é vida. Somos a CCR. Nosso propósito é melhorar a vida das pessoas através da mobilidade. Pelo Instituto CCR, apoiamos a cultura em nosso país. Valorizamos os encontros, valorizamos a vida.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, Mac Móveis. Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
A história da barraca veio através do meu pai, né, que trabalhou muito aqui, 18 anos, com esse mesmo ponto. Tem uma parceria com todos os produtores rurais aqui, né, de Paraty. Alguns até trazem no momento, como estou sem carro, alguns trazem aqui para mim. É tudo orgânico, graças a Deus, né? Uma parceria que a gente fizemos aí. Olha, devido ao público que a gente alcançamos, eu prefiro trabalhar assim. É mais prazeroso, a pessoa tem mais liberdade, né? Tanto o local para parar, né? O carinho, a atenção que a gente tem dos clientes, né? E o nosso também para o cliente. Então eu acho melhor, ser mais prazeroso, se tá na rua. Quando eu atraso, que também já fico preocupado se eu vou abrir, se não vou abrir. Então eles sentem falta. Realmente é impressionante. Já faz parte da rua.
Flipe, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
America.
Boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
Que bom que essa tenda é grande para poder esconder
It's good that we have a big auditorium to welcome you all and help you escape from the rain. But we are doing our work and we'll help stop raining. We'll make it stop raining. We start the table, round table number 5, which is inventing in Latin America. I believe I produced this to prove a bunch of things that I truly believe in. The first thing is that the broader literature, mainstream literature, it is done by the strength of words, but it is also contaminated by everything else in the world all the time. Today we have 2 Latin American authors, Joca, Reiners, Terron, Brazilian from Cuiabá, and Juan Cárdenas from Colombia. And they have a feverish imagination, but also they have their roots in reality. I would like to, first of all, something I didn't do for the other round tables, and I apologize. I would like to immensely thank our interpreters and the translators that are there in the booth working hard for everyone to understand what we're saying. And I would also like to say that if you wish, you can submit questions in writing. Our team will gather your questions not only here, but also in the main square. To mediate this roundtable, I would like to invite Noemi Jaffe. She is an author also. These are fundamental books, at least to me, such as Lily, the novel on mourning, and also a book about writing. And Noemi, please join me here on the stage.
Boa tarde.
Good afternoon. I would like to invite our 2 authors to join me. So first I would like to invite our Colombian author, writer, translated, graduated in philosophy, art critic, also translator, I've already said that. Juan Cárdenas, please join me here. And also I'd like to invite a writer, translator, professor, poet, editor, my dear friend. He also graduated in industrial design. So Joca, Reiners, Terron, please join us here. I will start introducing the 2 authors. Juan Cárdenas, as I said, he was born in Colombia. He's a writer, and he has one single book translated in Brazil called The Devil of the Provinces, and also with a couple of books that are ready to be translated by DBA Editing House. He's also a translator. He has translated William Faulkner, Thomas Worth, but also from Portuguese, authors such as Machado de Assis, Essa de Queiroz, and João Gilberto Noll. He coordinates a master's degree in creative writing in Bogota, and he was born in a city with a very welcoming city called Popayán. The city is also a character in most of his books. He has lived all over. Not only he lives in Colombia, he lived in Madrid, Lisbon, and His books are Zumbido, Ornamental, Tu e Jo, Una Novela Russa, The Devil of the Provinces, Elástico das Sombras, and the last one last year, which is the Peregrino Transparente. He was awarded Outras Voces Award Otros Ámbitos, and Outras Vozes, Outros Ámbitos, and also the narrative José María Arguedas with the book Devil of the Provinces. Joca Reiners Terron, as I said, is a writer that goes between prose and poetry. He's also a translator from Spanish. He's one of the main disclosures of Latin American literature here for all of us in Brazil. And he is a writing professor, and he is interested in authors that are not recognized, such as Valencio Xavier, José Agripino de Paula, Glauco Matoso, and as I said, one of the authors responsible for allowing Brazil to finally belong to Latin America, because all of us here in Brazil, for some very weird reason, consider ourselves as separate from Latin America, as if we weren't part of it. So, Joca's books, Não Há Nada Lá, published by Ciências do Ocidente Publishing House, of which he was a director, creator, founder, Curva do Rio Sujo, from Rock Bottom you can see the moon in a free translation, The Deep Sadness of Snow Leopards, also in a free translation, A Night Within the Night, also in a free translation. These were published by Companhia das Letras Publishing House, and Death and the Meteor, and Where Minotaurs Graze. These three last were published by Todavia Publishing House. He was awarded the Machado de Assis Award from Rock Bottom, you can also see the moon, and the EPCA for Best Novel because of his novel, Where Minotaurs Graze. I would like to add that he doesn't like question marks or exclamation marks. This is important. Yay. So, let's start with Juan Cárdenas reading an excerpt of his book translated into Portuguese, which is The Devil of the Provinces, and then Joca will read from Where Minotaurs Graze. Thank you. To me, it is a pleasure. I'm going to read an excerpt in Spanish, and then we switch into Portuguese. There are many, this is from The Devil in the Provinces. I'm going to read in Spanish, and you have simultaneous translation if you wish. The different chairs that were in distance, without understanding that the biologist, even though he was distracted with his own things, was hearing everything. The two scriptwriters sat, and they were complaining against their bosses. It is a black lesbian. What else could you expect? It's a nightmare with these dykes trying to work with us every day. Why are they so resentful? When they have a little bit of power, black people will become unbearable. Have you noticed? They could say nothing else because one of them, the ones that was wearing a cap, saw that the biologist was there, like an alligator, and without knowing what to do, the script writer put on his glasses, and then he tried to fall into the pool. When he came back to the border of the pool, he felt like he was under dust, and the biologist said the biologist was drying himself with a towel and he would answer anything. The biologist started laughing to himself, not because of the towel detected a certain smile and he was looking menacing. Other hangover bathers came also, and they all came together in one single conversation. The biologist, always behind his dark glasses, was thinking about the future, and the future under the sun, like if it was lemon juice or lemonade, he was thinking about the future as images that had disconnects images that would be a prosthetic leg, passion fruit, all black people walking around farms. Where are these people that are so well dressed going? And the biologist follows them, as he suspected. They walk without any direction. They are like robots, and he always talk about the same things with the same five sentences with like a virus on a computer, and then they separate their paths, and the biologist doesn't know who he's going to follow. He decided to follow the tallest one, and the other one he allows to follow the tallest one, and the black man goes through the farm, through a new part of the construction. He goes in front of the pool, and the biologist will follow him at a certain distance. The black man with his blue suit, and he will try to protect himself in the sugarcane plantation to try to hide from the sun, lacking any kinds of enthusiasm as someone that is used to that landscape, and with that air of those who always win. His blue suit will hide among the sugarcane plantation, and then when there's no trait of the black man, the monoculture will hide everyone. For monoculture, there's no story, no man, only eternity. So there's the absolute nothing. The monoculture is the will of God on earth. Land without a land, the divine algorithm that making everything will be some zero for the glory of only one. The biologist will hide among the different sugarcane plants, following the greatest and hardest thing among the inhuman plants that will try to overcome all other plants. The sugarcanes and certain species of plants are actually the apocalypse. This is the national pasture, the sugarcane and the slaves, banana that is no longer a banana, everything is conspiring to take over the world and using us as slaves. These two black people are a million of robots that are programmed by corporations that are trying to pretend to work on behalf of capitalism, but they're agents of a master plan of the plans of the end of all times. We're sorry we did not receive this reading in time to prepare, and he was also reading very fast, so we apologize for the poor interpretation. Good afternoon.
Even when they celebrate, we can see that they are sad. They do not know any other way of looking at the world unless through fences, and they have only fences to look at. It seems that for them there are 1,000 fences, and behind 1,000 fences there is no world. The fence is their sense of measure of the space. First they use it to confine large dimensions of land with a discourse that this way they protect them, but we don't know from who or from what. After all, behind the fences, they themselves are there. This comes from forgotten times because it took place so long ago that it can no longer be remembered. And with this, they also forget that every fence confines at the same time that it protects. They are contradictory. They see us through the fences, imagining that they are confining us, but they forget that they are also imprisoned, or maybe they are the only ones to be imprisoned because we don't know what fences are. We only know what landscape is, something that they ignore. They would never know how to live in a circular landscape, and that's why they feel imprisoned when they see the space being open to them, the immense loneliness of infinite spaces. Nothing terrorizes them more than that. Then they build up fences to look at, fences that protect them from the looseness of landscape. They need this confinement of this protection. When they imprison the other, they imprison themselves. However, they do not realize it. The boss confines the employer confines the employee, the rich confines the poor. We don't know what makes the rich rich or the poor poor, or what's the difference between employer and employee. We're all equal to each other. We circulate in the landscape that surrounds us, and that's enough for us. They have small eyes, but they do not understand what they see. They drag behind them a series of things that we don't know what they are, and they somehow seem to be important to them, and those things dominate them, and they owe something to them, and they feel pain for having or not having those things. We have nothing but pasture, and we don't know what those things are and what's the relationship they have with them. We only see that those that do not have them can kill to have them, and those that have them kill for those that do not have them, continue not to have them. It's complicated.
Nisso estamos.
And that's how it is.
A despeito de
And in
acreditarem
spite
ao
of
seu Deus
attributing
a
to their
violência que
God the
praticam,
violence that they
perderam
practice,
qualquer
they've
sentido
lost
de
any
compreensão
sense of
do
understanding
sagrado.
of the sacred.
Não entendem
They
o
do not
pasto, e
understand the
mesmo que não
pasture, and
consigamos ver as estrelas
even if we are not
diretamente,
able
algo
to
que
directly
também
look at the
ignoramos, o
stars,
céu,
something that we
eles
also
conseguem
ignore,
vê-lo,
the sky,
a
they are
despeito
able
de
to
verem
see
nas
it in
estrelas
spite of
apenas uma
seeing
via
in
de escape
the stars only
si
an escape
mesmos.
route from themselves.
Ao contrário de nós,
Contrary to
que nos
us,
sabemos bem enraizados no
who
pasto
know that we
circular,
are
eles
very
se
well
sentem
rooted in
prestes
the
a se
circular pasture,
desprenderem do espaço.
they feel like ready
Talvez tenham
to
sido pássaros,
release themselves into space.
como esses
Maybe
que se
they
alimentam
have
dos
been
carrapatos
birds,
em
like
nosso
those
lombo.
that feed from the ticks
E
on our
tudo se resume
backs, and
à
everything
nostalgia do
ends
voo
up in
perdido.
the feeling
Ao
of
desejo
having
de partir.
lost a flight, this desire
Nós só podemos ver
to
o céu
go away. We
refletido
can
na
only
beira da
see the sky
lagoa ou nas
reflected on the
poças
borders of the
deixadas pela
lake or
chuva,
on the
apenas uma
puddles left by
nesga
the
dele,
rain, only
estrelas
only
turvas,
a patch
sinais
of it.
tardios de mundos
We see the blurred stars and
Nossa
late
fatalidade
signs of
é sermos
extinguished
devorados
worlds. Our
por
fatality
quem
is
nos
to be
ama.
devoured by
A
those that
deles
love us.
é
Theirs is
matar
to
a quem
kill
amam.
those they love.
É
It's
complicado.
complicated.
E nisso estamos.
And that's where we are.
Obrigado.
E nisso estamos.
And thus we are.
Queria fazer uma pergunta
I would
para
like
vocês dois,
to address a question to both of you.
me dirigindo primeiro a você,
First,
Joca.
for you, Joca,
Você criou uma editora
you
chamada
created a publishing
Ciência
house
do
called
Acidente.
The
Você tem
Science of
selo que vai
Accidents.
ser inaugurado
You
aqui
have
na
also
Flip,
a
chamado
publishing house that is
Errar
going
Melhor.
to be called
Você
Errar é Melhor. To get it wrong is better. You also coordinate a class called The Art of Disaster in Novels. You have a novel called Streets, Dead End Streets. And the other one is From Rock Bottom, you can also see the moon. So you, in your, by reading your novels and your essays, you can see that you also have this championing of failure in your novel.
Ai, gente, me ajuda.
Oh gosh, I forgot. The Devil of the Provinces. I'm sorry. I have too many novels in my mind right now. So in The Devil of the Provinces, there's people that are writing a film, preparing a film, even though you're not the one who is doing this critique, but the character himself, the author, they're shooting a movie, and you criticize these people because they are in a farm trying to do a novella that has all the different ingredients of success. So you also, you can see that you like to work with what is not yet concluded, what is heterogeneous and heterodoxical. So I'd like to ask both of you, what is the importance of the mistakes in your literature? And maybe a bit of a provocation. Is our current literature just too worried in getting it right and forgetting about getting it wrong?
Essa é uma grande pergunta.
That's a good question. Well, it's difficult to answer this because it's not as catastrophic as Joca would say. I don't like that much mistakes or failure, but I like things that are incomplete. What is asymmetric, incomplete? For instance, this novel that is written of different stories that, well, you never have a conclusion, you never have an ending to the stories. And I was criticized because of it. And I say, listen, I've opened all these stories and I didn't close one single one. So this is how books are. Books should be like that. You know, we're talking about what happens with the idea of telling a story in a social and political surrounding that is trying to ask everyone to develop memories. There's a strong pressure because of the current situation of capitalism in the global South, just to convey the situation in a nutshell. And because of this, there's a serious situation, because even if when we're not able to close certain stories, we're unable to have a sensible connections between things. Novels, or my novel had to adopt this format, this thing that is truncated, that there's no ending. I don't know if I put into context what you're asking, but this is it. I will allow Joca to take it from there. Yes. Well, I don't see myself as a catastrophic. I like to see myself as a utopian pessimist. It has to do with my character, my personality, you know. This is what we dictate to ourselves. However, you have to agree that it is a difficult time to produce literature. These times that we're living in. This conventional idea of literature is the idea of permanence in terms of remaining in the life of those who produce it. Supposedly, a book, at least when people didn't have, wouldn't live as long as we did today, a book would live more than a person in terms of how long it would last. I remember a book by Alberto Mangue that would say the books would live 70, 80 years. However, our generation produces a literature in which the idea of a future is flattened. And still, to produce literature in a period in which the idea this motif of permanence, of eternity, of a legacy, of, narratively passing the baton to the next generation. Well, this is flattened. And this is why, well, I've always had this hope, maybe naive understanding of literature that was something that would be motivated by chance. And, of course, authors, there are certain ways of controlling what that text will be as an author, but for this text to become what it is, you, of course, have to talk about catastrophes, accidents, chance, coincidences, and, of course, work. And therefore, they will allow the result to be less than what we as authors produce as a text. I don't like to talk about literature itself, but I like to say writing. It seems to be more of a living being. Literature, what is literature? It was produced by those who came before us, maybe the great classics. What we do, is it literature? I don't know. I rather understand it as a writing. So my writing is moved by chance, by accident, by disaster. Sometimes, according to different topics and themes, this disaster will permeate the text. But there's this whole condition in which we find ourselves. What are we going to do? Because why do we still write? I don't know. Sherazade, way back when, the beginning of storytelling, will tell her stories of 1,001 Nights in order to live, not only her life, but other women that will be killed by the Sultan if she's unable to capture his interest through her storytelling. So it seems to me that disasters happen, as you can see. Disasters are everywhere, and they are quite unexpected, as you can see. So, yes, I agree. I would like to revisit this idea, going back to your question. Could you maybe repeat your question?
Será que a literatura atual está muito preocupada em
Is
acertar
current literature
e se
very
esqueceu
much
de errar?
concerned about doing it right and forgetting to do it wrong? That's very important and very smart as a question, because now, due to market pressures, I would say market has a power that we've never seen before in the literary domain, because the market is driving the way we talk and the way we think, even inside academia, because in the past, academia would produce a series of concepts and ideas independently from the market. But I think that now they need to look at the market, and then they need to understand what are the trends and the fashions, and then they go to their labs, to their offices, and start to think, but always based on what the market points at. And there are many problems that arise from it, because one of them is that we are obsessed by the idea of making a good representation. What are the right ways to represent a given character? And this obsession with identity, I think it is very dangerous, especially for literature and fantasy and fiction. So I would rather always make mistakes in this sense. I would rather offer a bad representation, because bad representation has one aspect of what you were saying. The unexpected, the chance in writing can only be produced if you are open to the possibility of making a mistake and representing the bad side of things, or the evil. And of course, we have to remember also that to err, make mistakes, or to make an error in Portuguese, errar can also mean like walk around and allow oneself to
importante na tua obra, pelo que eu li, e que não sei se tem tradução em português,
so
não
I
sei
would like
também
to
se eu
talk
sei
about
falar
one
ela
of your
direito em
works, and I don't know
espanhol,
if
que
I
é
can pronounce it in Spanish, which is a word,
abigarrado.
Abigarrado. I don't know if there is a translation,
conseguiria encontrar um equivalente
and I don't know if the translators would find an equivalence in Portuguese, but you say that this word abigarrado that we find in your books, that I would see as heterogeneity or multiplicity or multicolor. Yes, it has to do with anthropophagy, it has to do with eating the other. Yes, it is related to what you were just saying, because you say that this word opposes itself to the ideas of syncretism and the dialectics of synthesis, which are always looking for the one, instead of showing the contradictions of a third element, which is different from the two previous ones, which is not seeking a synthetic or artificial harmony, but looking for difference and contradiction. And I see that in your books, especially in the last book, Peregrino Transparente, the Transparent Pilgrim, which has three very different parts that do not form a unity. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about this word and how it is present in your work. Well, let me explain in a way that does not oppose what you've just said. I was just thinking about the idea that we're living in times in which it is almost taboo to speak of universality. Universality is words. You are constraining reality, limiting reality, trying to edit reality so that it becomes one reality. But I think that every time I hear about it, I always thought about the Haitian revolution, the revolution in Haiti, because the enslaved people in Haiti, they did a revolution based on an idea of universality, but they had stolen this idea of universal from the French. So they thought, let's build a total and actual universality. That's one of the paragraphs of the Haiti Constitution of 1902 or 3, and from now on, every citizen in this country will be considered black. That's what's written in their constitution of 1903. And I always think of it because it's very curious how now there is an obsession about the singularity. Everyone wants to defend singularity all the time. And what about the guys from the Haiti revolution that did all this incredible revolution? They were able to defeat Napoleon's army, and they did it based on the idea of universality. They took this idea of universality, they radicalized it and applied it. And so I always think of this idea of universal as something that is reflected in Haiti's constitution, as something abigarrado in Spanish. There is no such word in other languages. So the origin of this word is uncertain. Even in Spanish, if you take it, etymology dictionaries, no one knows where the word comes from, but that's the sense of the word. And I always thought of an idea of universality, an abigarrada universality, the possibility of having a universality that collects and contemplates human diversity, which is something inherent to human nature, and especially now that we have this obsession for correct representation, the right representation. I think that it comes as a reaction against universality. It is, in my opinion, a weird misunderstanding. That's why I defend an idea of universality, and universality that is built from grassroots, from the people, because these people has always been anthropophagic in a way. So, well, this idea of multiculturality that we find very often in debates today, well, sometimes it bothers me a little bit because I grew up during dictatorship, and of course this dictatorship took the ideas of Gilberto Freire and the composition of the three races as composing the national tissue and appropriating in favor of the whitening of the Brazilian population. But that's, of course, the negative side of this theory, and somehow, later on, we were able to actualize it through Caetano Veloso and other artists and intellectuals. But sometimes, why not trying to see the positive side of this vision, understanding ourselves as a mixed people, this idea of prevalence of the quest for singularity, for uniqueness in terms of representation is something that when it affects literature or the literary production, it affects a notion of representation which is complicated. It seems to me that it requires a deeper debate on what the cliches of the left and even more cliches from right-wing movements are talking about. Why, for instance, why does a book written by a given person needs to be translated by the same person? Why should there be a correspondence? A fiction
ao ser traduzido, ele
book,
precisa
when
receber
it
uma
is
tradução de uma pessoa
translated,
que
needs
atenda aqueles
to
mesmos traços.
be translated by someone that
Diferentemente,
will
por exemplo, no teatro.
respect
Se eu
the
for ver
traits
Hamlet
of the book.
com
Let's
Edson
take
Celulari,
theater drama.
eu vou esquecer que Edson Celulari é um
If I
ator
watch
brasileiro muito
Hamlet,
popular, eu acho,
played by
ótima figura,
Edson Celulari,
nascido em
which is a
Bauru,
well-known
né? Eu
actor,
vou
Brazilian
esquecer que
actor.
aquele Hamlet,
Well,
eu entro na peça e olho o Hamlet
when I
papel
get there
encarnado por
at
Edson
the
Celulari, eu esqueci que ele nasceu em
theater
Bauru,
room, I
né? A
forget
cidade do
that it
Noroeste,
is about
Pelé, onde Pelé começou
Edson
sua carreira e
Celulari,
tal.
that
De
who was
repente,
born in a
Hamlet
given
é
city, and
Bauru.
etc.
É uma mágica,
It's
certo?
some kind of
Agora,
magic.
evidentemente, a hora que o
But
Edson
of
Celulari
course, the
sai
moment
pela
Edson
coxinha, ele
Celulari
deixa de ser
leaves
Hamlet.
the stage, he
E,
no
portanto,
longer
nós deixamos de
is
acreditar que,
Hamlet, and we
nesse sentido de
stop
representação.
believing in
Porque
this
no
sense
campo da ficção,
in
esse tipo de
representation, because in
representação
the field of
deve ser
fiction, this kind of
defendido
representation
e deve
needs to be
permanecer como uma
defended and
ideia
needs to
razoável.
remain as
Não me
a
parece
reasonable idea.
razoável,
It doesn't
né?
seem to me to be reasonable.
Enfim, não sei se eu me fiz entender.
I don't know if
Não, acho que
if
sim,
I
muito
made
bem.
myself understood. Yes, I think you did.
E acho que vai ser difícil a gente sair do mesmo tema, embora
And
as
I believe it will
perguntas
be
sejam
difficult to
diferentes.
abandon the same topic, even though the questions are
No trecho
different.
que você leu,
Because
Joca,
in the text
são
that
os
you were
bois
reading, Joca,
descrevendo os homens, né?
it's
São
about the
cinco
cows
monólogos
describing men.
feitos pelos
There are
bois
5
distribuídos ao longo do
monologues
romance, onde
by the
pastam os
cows
dinossauros. Esses bois
spread
estão
over the
localizados dentro
novel,
de
and they are
matadouro, eles
located
são
in a
meio que
slaughterhouse.
iludidos,
They are
enganados,
more or
né,
less
naquele
deceived
matadouro
in
circular,
that circular
de que tá tudo bem, de que
slaughterhouse,
vai
and
ficar tudo bem.
with the
O
idea
círculo
that
faz com
everything
que
is
eles se
okay,
sintam
and the
mais
circle
calmos do que
makes
se
them
eles
feel
caminhassem em linha reta,
calmer.
mas eles estão indo para serem
But
abatidos.
they
Ou
will
seja,
be
esses bois
slaughtered.
que falam
So
no
those
livro,
cows
eles
that
estão
speak in your
aprisionados,
book, they are
se encaminhando
imprisoned,
para a morte. Mas
and
o
they
livro deixa
are
bem claro
walking
que
towards death.
os homens que
But
trabalham
the
naquele
book makes it
matadouro,
very
talvez
clear
eu
that
pudesse
the
dizer
people, the men that work in that
figurativamente, os humanos em
slaughterhouse,
geral também
and
estão
figuratively
presos.
maybe human beings
Eu
in
acho que o
general,
livro
they
deixa
are
isso bem claro,
also
que estamos todos
imprisoned, and
aprisionados.
that's what the book makes
E
very
no
clear.
trecho
We
que
are
você
all
leu, Juan,
imprisoned,
você
and
fala
in
da
the
monocultura,
stretch of the book
né?
that
Você
you
diz que a
read, Juan,
monocultura
you
nega
speak
o
of
tempo e o
monoculture that
cancela.
denies
Para a
time and
monocultura
cancels
não há
it.
história,
For
nem
monoculture, there is
homens,
no
apenas a
history, no
eternidade,
man,
isto é,
only eternity,
nada absoluto.
which
Então eu
is
queria partir
nothing,
dessa
the
ideia de
absolute. So I would
monocultura e
like
de
to
aprisionamento, porque a
stem from this
monocultura
idea of
está,
monoculture and
acho que
imprisonment,
ocupando a
because
América
I think
Latina
that
inteira,
monoculture is
né? No
covering
Brasil você também fala
Latin
disso,
America as a whole, and in Brazil you also see it. We can drive for many and many kilometers, and you see only one kind of crop. And I would like you to develop at the same time this idea of imprisonment and monoculture, including the cattle and pastures and grazing lands and etc.
É uma loucura. Eu tive
Well, it's
festival em
really
Bonito,
crazy.
né, no
I've
Mato Grosso do Sul, que é
been
uma
at a
instância
festival
turística,
in
assim,
Bonito,
fazia
the city,
bom tempo
in
que eu não
Mato
ia
Grosso do
ao
Sul
Mato Grosso do
State,
Sul.
and it's a beautiful
E fui de
place.
carro de Campo Grande até
And
Bonito.
I drove from Campo Grande to
Eu passei
Bonito.
a infância até a
And
adolescência, assim,
during
no
my
Centro-Oeste, no
childhood,
Mato
I
Grosso.
spent it
E
in the
eu fiquei muito
Midwestern
impactado pela
region
mudança da
of the country,
paisagem,
and I was
porque a
very
monocultura, ela é,
impacted by the
como
change
o
in
próprio nome diz,
landscape, because
monótona em
monoculture,
termos
as the name says,
da
is
irregularidade
monotonous
da paisagem
in terms of
característica, que era
the
o cerrado daquele-
irregularity
daquela
of the
região, né?
original landscape, which was
são
cerrado
centenas de
in
quilômetros,
Portuguese.
assim, só
And now you
de
drive and you see
transgênico,
hundreds
sabe?
of
De
kilometers
soja,
of
assim.
transgenic
Dos dois lados,
corn
não tem mais nada.
fields
Aí você
on
entra em
both
Bonito,
sides
aí
of the road,
tem
and
aquela
then you
espécie de
reach
oásis.
Bonito,
seja,
the city, and
na
there's
hora eu
this
entendi
kind of
que Bonito era
oasis,
oásis,
and at the
e
same time I understood
por
that Bonito was an
extensão,
oasis, and
entendi
by
que aquela
extension I
monocultura só
understood
podia representar
that
o deserto.
that monoculture that I had seen
Aquela
could
paisagem.
only
E se assemelha
mean
muito em termos da
the
cor,
desert, and
assim,
it's
né?
very similar in terms
Agora,
of its color.
bem, a monocultura também
Well,
representa um achatamento
monoculture
assim,
also
do humano
represents
nessas
a
regiões.
flattening
Na-
of
na medida
the
em
human
que, sei
aspect
lá,
in those regions.
você vai ter
in the extent that you have a harvesting machine which is super technological and operated by a single person. And of course, they may have some kind of study or education differently from their forebears, but it's like dozens of kilometers in which you see one person driving a machine, and, well, they still need a person to operate those machines because they could be operated remotely. So we could raise many issues, the persecution of which the Guarani people are victims in a practice from colonial times, among the worst that still exist. But there is also those people who in the past cultivated the fields who are no longer there. And that's the flattening of the landscape and also the flattening of the notion of humankind, of humanity. Monoculture is also a method to destroy the popular idea of territory, because territory is not... It's actually a collective construction idea, because it is made up of stories. We tell stories, and story by story, you define a territory. And so for me, it has always been important when I started to think of this topic and when I was writing this book. It's something I was very close to when I was growing up. I was close to the Cauca River Valley, and there were many kilometers of sugarcane plantations. And for me, the most interesting and important aspect was always to listen to what people were dreaming of around this monoculture lands. It's very interesting because, okay, I like the idea of abstraction. It's very abstract as a monoculture. It's an emptiness. But at the same time, it's something else, because we continue to create images and stories around monoculture. And those stories, they change. They are no longer as they were in the past. Because in the past, when we had, let's say, this territory, the stories were very different. And now what we see is nightmares. Monoculture is seen as hell. And another interesting aspect to think of when we analyze monoculture as a scenario for literature is there many things take place in monoculture. Many things take place. For instance, in a sugarcane plantation monoculture in that region, there are clandestine roads that drug dealers use to circulate money or to kill people. It's places to hide bodies. And so there is a use of land by criminal capitalism, which is very intermingled with the traditional capitalism. They're moving together, and it's very interesting for me to have this dimension, always listening to the people who live close to monoculture lands, and about what they say about the transformation of space and of their imaginary. And you do ask them, yes, I do. I go there, I go there, and I live very close by, so it's not like an expedition or a long trip. Yes, but I did travel around some places a long time ago, but it's more of a daily thing to me. I go there, and I did some work on the African diaspora movement in some places, and those friends of mine that live close to monoculture areas, it's very interesting to talk to them and to listen to them and the stories they tell and the fantasies they build up as with this, based on this motive. Well, I know you like very much Guimarães Rosa, Juan, and you cited Milton Yawarete in your book, and I chose a text from my book in Portuguese, and I think that you wrote it, but he dictated it. On the other hand, life, what they call nature, is the work of the devil, which allies itself to wild animals and serpents and scorpions, and the devil is there present in the tainted shell of the eggs, in the whirlpools in the rivers. And I would like you to talk about Guimarães Rosa, that said that the hinterlands or sertão, they are the world, but wouldn't they be more Latin America than the rest of the world?
Well, I love Guimarães Rosa, because normally many people have read Guimarães Rosa as if it was a regional author, someone that is representing the parts that no one else had ever talked about, or almost never talked about, at least not in that depth. But I don't see Guimarães Rosa as a regional writer. He's also, of course, also a local or regional author. But since the very beginning, I was very interested in Guimarães Rosa because there's this cosmic nature when he talks about the backlands, when he talks about the spaces, when he follows the destiny of a character, of his character. He's trying to reveal that there is a cosmic revelation behind the risks and the dangers. And this is something that happened in the description he does of the different landscapes. And this is why I always love Guimarães Rosa. He is something that is always, I'm always drinking from his fountain. But Guimarães Rosa has also something to do with magic, the magic of the backlands. And I know you don't like the term fantastic realism, and you neither, Joca. I am not Colombian, so I have no say in that. So I don't have to answer that. Magical realism, realism fantástico in Portuguese. So why don't you like the magical realism? Yes, I'm not going to fall in that trap. Well, at least Joca isn't. Well, this is a colonial category of literature, and there are different categories that were invented by the market. And the Academy decided to give some kind of theoretical stuffing to convert it in a concept, but was never able to. And this is happening now with some categories, some hashtags, for instance, that you can't talk it, you can't consider it as a concept. It's just a hashtag. The new weird, for instance, lots of people are talking about that. They're talking about tropical Gothic, Andean Gothic, weird stuff going around. No, I mean it. I did the same thing when I saw that for the same thing. I laughed the first time I heard that. Well, I really laughed out loud, actually. However, this is a hashtag. It's not a true literary category for you to truly elaborate something. So these, well, of course, the market has its own trend. So it's good for the market. However, I don't think that the publishing houses are able to. I think it's definitely difficult to take this seriously. In your book, in Peregrino Transparente, Transparent Peregrine, there's this expedition in the 19th century that will research Colombia to get to know the hinterlands, the cities. And as this expedition that is extremely rationalized, and they start trying to understand the people who live around there, they become more familiar with the different the magical thoughts of these people, and they allow themselves go through this magic. Of course, you don't need to classify it as a magical realism. I hope not. Joca, you are a writer that not only you write, but you also you're very active in terms of the things you champion and defend. And one of these things is the idea of being a vanguard. You're very interested interested in a vanguard of Latin American authors that will go beyond the rules. Think about the outside of the box, that will not follow the rules. They will go beyond the margins of a more academic center. Do you think that there's still space for vanguard in our days? Where will we be able to build this vanguard? I'm under the impression that in an environment in which the different ideas and the novels will try to mimetize, but they try to use mechanisms to understand existing reality, supposedly. But these are mechanisms that don't seem to be sufficient to understand a world in constant transformation. So this whole idea of vanguard seems a bit silly. I'm even a bit embarrassed talking about experiences, to experiment, get it wrong, to get it wrong in an environment that seems so conservative, and that I see this in our literary workshops. The first books, our students write, so, oh, I need to tell the story of my grandmother. Oh, she was an amazing woman. But it's a woman that is exactly like many other women. They are very similar, of course, and I perfectly understand this desire of reproducing, of maintaining a certain story that is lost. For instance, the stories that are not written are forgotten. Therefore, I do understand this whole idea of using writing as a sort of archival work, to document a work. However, it is an attempt that is cheap, useless, futile, and wrong. And it's a sort of a perception of literature as something that is rigid, that cannot be transformed, and therefore cannot acquire new formats that could, in a certain way, represent these transformations we see. So we can see in the world, we are ready to live in a world where the whole notion of things, of elements, of objects that will follow our lives will lose themselves and then lose their meaning. As I was saying, this whole idea of territory. But sometimes this territory is at home, maybe in a family picture book. And this has disappeared. Families no longer have that as an element, as a narrative line or timeline that was essential for our own self-understanding. So, for instance, you would meet someone, you would, get that picture album, and to show the story of your family, you will sometimes skip a page where you had that ugly uncle because you don't want to show, the bad part of their family. You don't want to make a bad impression. You want to show that your family, everyone is nice, pure, and beautiful. But it was a storytelling, and this is lost. And in our world, we no longer have these objects that are a common trait to all of us, that will bear witness to our lives, and they will narrate what we are. They will narrate our own story. Therefore, this loss seems to be and can be, in a certain way, understood through writing, investigated through writing, as its new forms and formats that will try to detach itself from the whole idea of showing a reality that cannot be shown, that cannot be explained, that will transform from one to the next, because there's no single reality. In a certain way that will encompass culture and investigation, literature that will include this change, that will exclude objects, and in the rhetoric of our territory of perception, our space, our physical territory, but also takes us out from this object, the stories that are told by objects. So this whole idea of vanguard today no longer has to do with that classical idea of the beginning of the 20th century, with the Dadaists writing poems with words that are taken out of a hat. So there's no space for that kind of thing anymore. And this change has to exist. We were talking about utopic pessimism, and it has to do with this impossibility of having our ability of imagining things as we exist in the future. And this flattening of the future has to do with our inability of imagining possible futures. And it seems to me that fiction will fulfill an essential role of allowing us to have this imagination, this transformation, the perception of this reality, not in a conservative sense, but maybe understanding, maybe that person that you get to know, that you investigate in monoculture. How can you transform these mythical dreams of these people? How can you adapt this into a world that no longer has people that work in the same sector, in the same area? This person is left from one territory, but also from their social class. For instance, in the suburbs of the larger cities, the urban centers that have gone through immense changes with the disappearance of unions, for instance, of workers, blue-collar workers, and you see the precarious nature of work, where there's no longer a notion of belonging, of class. It seems to be crucial, essential, that we perceive that literature, yes, can be experimented with, that you can bring narratives that will not necessarily use tools or mechanisms in a realistic approach that comes from the 19th century. And you say, oh, well, maybe I'll put this character talking to this other character to tell a story of maybe some of my predecessors. We have to imagine a future, not rewrite the past permanently. Yes, if I could. I agree. I would like to add that I will believe in the power of images. I believe images are work as a conglomerate of collective desires. When you have a dream, and in your dream you might see, I don't know, an elephant inside a glass of water or something like that. I'm inventing, whatever. So those images that are seen in your daily life, in the dreams, I guess this is the power of an image. I believe that this is one of the most important tasks of a writer, is to try to capture and analyze the images that are in the social environment floating all around. Because these images are not only a result of a chance, they are accumulation of traumas, dreams, aspirations, and I find this so important. And I guess there is the seed of the future of literature, but the future of mankind also. And that's it. Yeah. So, but do you think? Well, I guess one of the principles that allows someone to write something have to do with the impossibility of communication, to the extent that this language always fails, and that's its fate. And specifically the language that we use to communicate on a daily basis. So I think that one of the principles that will allow someone to write is the need of understanding what will be in their mind. What are they thinking of? Noemi, what is Noemi thinking of? But in this sense, it's as if we were going through a period in which there was a need of, resurrecting our inner lives that will be enriched by the importance of dreams, of the importance of desire, and the understanding of this need to internally investigate things intimately. But I'm not talking about self-fiction. I'm talking about this resurrection of your inner life, and all of us, and all people, not only, of course, the writers, but readers also. And even for those who do not read, especially those that do not read, who were, brought in or drawn in by all the gadgets, smartphones, social networks, and that simply no longer use the language of a dialogue and conversation. A conversation has become something less and less common, a nice conversation. We're just sitting together, maybe with tea and cake, and talking to one another. In Cuiabá, we say cha, or tea, because monoculture also destroys everything, even your different ways of speaking. Everybody will have the same way of speaking or their own accents. So this is what happened. And people are sometimes embarrassed of their accents. And so they change the way they're speaking. They speak thanks to those that came from the south, and then those from Cuiabá that have an accent, because no one knows where Cuiabá is, even less so Mato Grosso. But it's such an interesting place, and that had a very interesting way of speaking with different accents. So all the O's and vowels were closed, and the CHs were always ch, like that. Machichi, pachichi, all that like that. The CHs were like that. And we were going to eat fish with machichi. So look up the Manuel de Barros videos on YouTube, and you will see the accent. He's from Corumbá. He was born in Cuiabá, but he had this kind of accent. But people are embarrassed by that. And they standardize their accents as if they were trying to maybe, for instance, I don't know, get a job in the national, as a broadcaster, as an anchor in a newspaper, in a televised news. So I don't know how I got here. Well, how did I get here? I don't know. I was imitating his books, Juan Cárdenas. He starts talking about one thing, and then he goes to the other side of the world. So I'm going to tell a story about this guy and this guy and this and that. I'm going to maybe write a Western, and then all of a sudden you're in outer space, in terms of linguistic investigation, but also in his imagination. Yes, I guess this has to do with what you just said and what we are talking about. In a sentence from Hamid Sar, and he will talk about, actually, I guess it's Saturday, Mohammed Mugbasa. He says when he sees that a book is about something, he stops reading it. Because books are not about people. It is literature that talks to us. So this has to do with what you were saying in terms of imagery, to actually listen what images are telling us. Juan, there's a question here from the audience addressed to you. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the facão and the gota de sangue, the knife and the drop of blood in your book? Oh, there's spoiler there. I'm not sure I should. It's difficult to talk about this without giving any spoilers. But I'll try. Well, it is a reference to the final chapters. It's, I guess, a machete and a drop of blood, in which the main character, has a meeting with criminals, with a very shady character, and they will in a certain way decide the fate of that protagonist. So he tells the biologist will tell the protagonist a story that has to do with a machete and a drop of blood. But I don't want to tell the story. I don't want to tell the spoiler. I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. I'm not able to answer that question. I'm so sorry about that. But now everyone is curious about the whole thing. Well, actually, whenever we finish this roundtable, everybody will go to the signing, because then you'll be able to buy the book, read the book, and they will sign the book. So you won't. Everybody will know everything about the book. Okay. So, Joca, also a question from the audience. What would cattle say in the forests and the permaculture conditions? What will be the utopian optimism? Oh, I tried to think about what cattle would think. Only in my book I was able to do that. I wrote a book about it. It is a narrative contingency. I did not establish a connection with a cow, a telepathic connection with a cow. Let's say, now I can hear and understand everything that cows say. Well, it's not exactly what happened. This is sometimes happen when you're sitting there considering, you don't have much to do in your life, and say, you know what, I'm going to write something. And then this happens. So I have no idea. No idea. So what I think I was saying is, that we have every day 175,000 cows are born, and 200,000 human beings are born every day. So, did you see the article on The Guardian saying that this bunch of meteorologists investigating, preparing a report saying, guys, wake up. 70% of the vital signs of our Earth are impacted by climate change. But still, 200,000 people are born, 175,000 cows are born, and that's it. So these 275,000 beans or this gas farms of methane produce will do away with the planet. So this is something has to be done. I don't have to connect myself with the cows to understand. That's it.
E não chega com permacultura para solucionar o problema.
And permaculture is not going to solve the problem, so do not try it.
Otimismo
So this
você falou que você era pessimista.
utopian optimism. Well, actually, you said you were a pessimistic person. Yes, that's it. Utopian pessimism. Yeah, we are going to start a movement wearing T-shirts on. Well, we're reaching the end of our session, and I would like you to make a final comment or some conclusion to maybe a message of how to be a utopian pessimistic person. Well, I would say maybe a dystopian optimistic person. Well, I am probably also an utopian pessimistic person. I believe in change, but I think that things are in permanent change. So we live in times of uncertainty. We do not know what the future will bring to us.
No entanto, temos que seguir aqui sonhando,
However, we need to continue
dançando, tentando
celebrar
o mundo.
Você faz uma defesa da leveza.
Yes, you present
toda a vida a
gente
nobleness
or lightness, actually. Yes, it is important because we've always been taught to be ashamed of tropicality, of being tropical, and tropical is as if it were a synonym of a frivolous pleasure or lack of responsibility, irresponsibility. And I believe in the idea of irresponsibility or lightness, and I think it is very important for us on this side of the world to defend the idea of irresponsibility as a way of being in the world which is different from the rest of the world. It is not a reason for being ashamed or embarrassed about anything. It's being tropical. Tropicality is our greatest power now. Yes, and anthropophagy also. Yes, totally. Well, let's bring back to life anthropophagy. Well, it never died, actually. Yeah, well, but it is very close to being dead. They're trying to kill it, but we won't allow it.
O Simas ontem terminou a fala
yesterday
dele, né,
Simas
com festa,
ended his
conclamando todo mundo
his
a
talk,
festejar, porque a festa
inviting
não é
everyone to
frívola,
celebrate
a festa
because
não é vã. Você faz
celebration
uma
is not
defesa também
frivolous,
da
celebration
gratuidade.
is not vain.
gratuidade
You
A
also
gratuidade talvez
you
seja a
also
escapatória, a alternativa que a gente
talk
tem,
about
já que tudo é pago, já que tudo é
gratuity,
comprado,
like
vamos acreditar que
since
existe
everything is paid
almoço
for, well, let's
grátis.
believe there is free lunch somewhere.
Vamos acreditar no
Let's
eterno
believe in
Deus
the
mudança,
eternal
né? Como o profeta Gilberto Gil
God
se
change,
manifestou.
as Gilberto Gil once said.
Bom, queria agradecer vocês,
So
agradecer
obrigado.
todo
thank you
mundo.
very much. Thank you also to everyone in the room.